Judgment Day, the resurrection of the soul, and uh, the belief in one God only all arose from Egyptian belief. In the Hebrew Torah, young Joseph, favored by his father Jacob, stirred jealousy among his 11 brothers. Their resentment intensified after Joseph shared a prophetic dream suggesting his future superiority. Fueled by envy, his brothers plotted against him, ultimately selling him into slavery to traveling merchants who then took him down to Egypt. This betrayal and forced journey marked the beginning of Joseph's unexpected and transformative life in a foreign land. In Egypt, Joseph's fortune rose dramatically due to his ability to interpret dreams, eventually leading him to a position of great power under the Pharaoh. When a severe famine struck the region, Joseph's foresight allowed Egypt to stockpile grain, and his brothers unknowingly came seeking provisions. After testing them, Joseph revealed his identity, and a tearful reconciliation followed. He then facilitated the migration of his father Jacob and the entire Hebrew family to the fertile land of Goshen in Egypt, ensuring their survival during the famine. This move established a significant Hebrew presence in Egypt for generations to come. The ancient Egyptians held a complex belief system centered on the soul's journey after death, culminating in a form of judgment and the possibility of resurrection. They believed the soul consisted of several parts, including the Ka, life force, and the Ba, personality. Upon death, Ba would journey through the underworld, facing trials and dangers as described in texts like the Book of the Dead. The heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and morality, was crucial in the judgment ceremony. It was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth and justice, before Osiris, the god of the dead. If the heart balanced, the deceased was deemed righteous and could enter the afterlife, often envisioned as an idyllic field of reeds. Mummification was practiced to preserve the body, seen as essential for the soul's return and eventual resurrection, mirroring the myth of Osiris, who was resurrected after being dismembered. Thus, their beliefs intertwined concepts of the soul's journey, moral judgment, and the potential for renewed life in the afterlife through divine intervention and proper preparation. It is important to understand that the concept of a fully developed judgment day and resurrection, as understood in later Judaism and Christianity, was not a central part or clearly defined belief among the Hebrews before their extended stay in Egypt. Their early beliefs about the afterlife were more focused on a shadowy underworld called Sheol. Sheol was the primary concept of the afterlife, often depicted as a dark, silent realm where all the dead, righteous and unrighteous alike, went. It was a shadowy existence, a cessation of life as they knew it, rather than a place of punishment or reward. The beliefs of the Hebrews regarding Judgment Day and resurrection underwent significant development during and after their departure from Egypt over subsequent centuries. While the focus before Egypt was more of a communal fate, the experience of Egypt and the exile from Egypt, the development of prophecy and reflection on divine justice led to a greater emphasis on individual responsibility and the idea that individuals will be held accountable for their actions. The concept of bodily resurrection began to emerge more clearly in later Hebrew texts, particularly in the prophetic books like Isaiah and Ezekiel, though interpretations of these passages vary, and definitely in the book of Daniel, written much later during the Hellenistic period. The famous vision of the valley of dry bones in Ezekiel is often seen as a metaphor for national restoration, but it also provided imagery that could be applied for individual resurrection. While sharing some broad themes, the Egyptian beliefs in the soul, afterlife, and judgment present notable differences from modern Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But you have to look at it in reality. The basic framework and concept of the soul, afterlife, and judgment, good versus evil, was all there, and no one can debate the fact that the Egyptian culture, the Pharaonic Egyptian culture, far preceded both Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Egyptian concept of a multi-part soul contrasts with the general singular soul in the Abrahamic faiths. While Egyptians emphasized the soul's journey through the underworld and a judgment focused on the heart's purity for potential resurrection and earthly paradise, modern Judaism initially focused less on a detailed afterlife with later development of Gehenna and Gan Eden. So Judaism eventually adopted this. Christianity centers on the soul's immediate judgment after death, which is very similar to really what the Egyptians did. They did a mummification and then a ritual, and Judgment Day was the weighing of the heart against the feather. And in Christianity, leading the judgment led to either heaven or hell, with a future bodily resurrection and final judgment. Okay, so there is a delay there. First concept is, well, judgment occurs immediate, but it doesn't really when you look at Christianity. There's a final judgment that occurs after the final resurrection, at least in many Christian beliefs. Islam similarly posits an individual judgment after death, followed by a final day of judgment and resurrection, leading to eternal paradise or hell. Well, that's really identical to Egyptian belief, the original Egyptian belief. Your judgment day, and that weighing of the heart uh, gave you two paths. One was to basically to hell, or the opportunity to make the travel to nirvana and heaven. And there is a lot of accoutrements in the Egyptian beliefs where the Egyptians stored food for their dead, and a lot of other things they thought were, yeah, that's all been dropped from Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But the core belief of Judgment Day and resurrection, it all comes from uh, the original Egyptian thought, and it, as I mentioned, it far predates Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So, looking at this, and there's one other thing also that uh, we believe is peculiar to the Abrahamic religions is it's one God, that there's a God, one God to worship and give praise and thanks to. But there was in Egyptian history a pharaoh named Akhenaten who, for 17 years during his reign, dismissed all the worship of all the polygods and that were in Egypt, and one God. And it was the God was, some attribute that it was the sun. No, it wasn't the sun. If you look at it in the detail, of those who study that reign of Akhenaten, it was the rays of the sun. In essence, it was light. And if you go to Christianity, particularly the book of John, and certainly in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll see the battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Light was definitely an identity of goodness. And of course, the Egyptians also recognized the sun as their source of life in general. So, but the light itself was what Akhenaten worshipped. and it has very strong parallels in later Christianity, and as I mentioned, the Dead Sea Scrolls and their concepts of good versus evil, the battle of the sons of light, and the battle against darkness. And one final thought regarding the worship of one God and the Hebrew history is important. While Moses was atop Mount Sinai receiving 10 commandments from God, the Israelites grow, had grown impatient and fearful of his prolonged absence and pressured Aaron to create a god they could see and worship. Now, this was after they had left Egypt, okay? So they still are holding to the beliefs of polygods and other gods to worship. Aaron fashioned a golden calf from melted down jewelry, and the people proclaimed it as the God who had brought them out of Egypt, offering sacrifices and engaging in revelry. And if you think this concept of mine that Egypt originated monotheistic belief, there was a famous psychiatrist who wrote a book in the 20th century proposing that Moses was the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, and his name was Sigmund Freud. In this book, published in 1939, which was titled Moses and Monotheism, this controversial work that Freud theorized that Moses was an Egyptian nobleman, possibly a follower of Akhenaten's monotheistic Aten cult, who led a group of Semitic people out of Egypt and was later murdered by them. Freud's ideas, while influential, are not widely accepted by historians and archaeologists, but that shows that there are people who are not dummies and can weigh the fact that it couldn't be coincidence that Akhenaten, in his 17-year reign, introduced monotheism, and the Hebrews left uh, Egypt and eventually adopted monotheism, and then were led by Moses, who was pushing the concept, which was foreign to the Hebrews. The idea of monotheism was foreign to them. Yet in Egypt, it had been established that for a while, at least for 17 years, that there was one and only one God.